Local authorities seek to impose stricter measures to limit the spread of COVID-19. Paris is now at the highest alert level in France, and the mayor of New York is seeking to rewind the opening up of 9 zip codes. Donald Trump's doctors say the president's health is improving and he could be discharged from hospital as early as tomorrow. And the president of Azerbaijan rules out a ceasefire with Armenia until an apology and a timetable for withdrawing from Nagorno-Karabakh is issued. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. We begin with the latest on the coronavirus pandemic. The French capital has now been placed on the highest alert level, and stricter measures will be going into effect from Tuesday. That's according to a declaration from the Prime Minister's office. Now, working from home is once again being prioritized. Restaurants in Paris can remain open, but will need to adhere to stricter sanitary protocols. The mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, is said to be making a statement on the issue tomorrow morning. In the last 24 hours alone, over 12,500 people have tested positive for COVID-19 here in France. New York City's mayor is seeking to shut schools and non-essential businesses in 9 neighborhoods starting from Wednesday. Coronavirus positivity cases in the zip codes have spiked, while 11 others are being placed on a watch list. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo will need to approve the shutdown, which will impact neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens. Here's de Blasio speaking earlier.
So the plan is to rewind in these 9 zip codes, to rewind, to go back, to address the problem by using the tools that we know work, which is to ensure that non-essential businesses are not open and a variety of activities are not happening. Again, no joy in saying that, but that, unfortunately, we do know is what is necessary to stop the spread of the coronavirus.
For more on this story, we can go across to correspondent Hoda Osman in New York. Hoda, what more do we know so far?
So the steadily increasing infection rate in those 9 neighborhoods is what led to this announcement today. What we know is that the measures will involve closing non-essential businesses, including private and public schools. This affects roughly about 500,000 people in those 9 zip codes in Brooklyn and Queens. It's not going to start immediately. It's going to start on Wednesday. It gives businesses and schools about 2 days to prepare for the closures. And this could last for a minimum of 2 weeks, up to 4 weeks. But depending on when the positivity rate goes below 3% for 7 consecutive days, that's when we expect that maybe the restrictions will start being eased a bit. In addition, as you mentioned, 11 other neighborhoods are being kept on some sort of a watch list. There are lesser restrictions that will be imposed there, including closing gyms and indoor dining. Important to mention is that indoor dining in New York City just resumed this past weekend after 6 months of no indoor dining. So in those neighborhoods, unfortunately, the restaurants will have to be restricted to pickup and delivery services. And of course, the state will have to approve this proposal before it goes into effect on Wednesday.
Hoda, New York has been extremely precautious in the way it's reopened. As you just mentioned, indoor dining has only just begun. Residents have been extremely patient. How are they likely to react to these stricter measures which will be enforced?
So this, of course, will be a big disappointment. And you can even sense it in the mayor's tone today as he was making this announcement. New York, in spite of those clusters, has been doing really well. The infection rate is still at 1.4%. And for some time, it was at 1% or lower. So especially for businesses, I feel in those neighborhoods, they are going to be very disappointed because they've suffered for many months. They were looking forward to resuming business, making money again. And now this is going to have to come to a stop. But at the same time, I feel that New Yorkers will realize that this is necessary to contain those clusters before we see what everyone has been fearing, which is a so-called second wave. We're hoping that we don't see this. So I think that it's going to be seen as a necessary step.
Hoda, thank you very much for that update. Hoda Osman reporting there from New York. Now, Donald Trump's doctors say the president's health is improving and he could be released from hospital as early as tomorrow. The press conference coming after deferring assessments left it unclear how ill Trump had become since testing positive for COVID-19. The president's physician, meanwhile, said he didn't want to release information which could steer the course of his illness.
Doctors at the Walter Reed Medical Center continued to provide an optimistic assessment of President Trump's condition on Sunday, though it was revealed that his oxygen levels had briefly dropped on 2 occasions in recent days.
Regarding his clinical status, the patient continues to improve. He has remained without fever since Friday morning. His vital signs are stable.
If he continues to look and feel as well as he does today, our hope is that we can plan for a discharge as early as tomorrow to the White House where he can continue his treatment course.
According to his doctors, the US president is currently on a 5-day course of the intravenous antiviral drug remdesivir and is also being treated with the steroid dexamethasone in response to transient low oxygen levels. He received supplemental oxygen on Thursday and Friday. In addition, he's being given several vitamin supplements and other experimental treatment.
That's it.
Sunday's medical briefing came the day after contradictory messages from the White House led to widespread confusion about the president's condition. On Saturday, Trump addressed his illness in a video he posted to Twitter.
I'm starting to feel good. You don't know over the next period of a few days. I guess that's the real test. So we'll be seeing what happens over those next couple of days.
With Trump off the campaign trail indefinitely, high-profile allies, including Vice President Mike Pence and the president's elder sons, Donald Jr. and Eric, will take over in-person campaigning this week.
We can now bring in Brian Colt, Professor of Law at Michigan State University. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24. There you heard there in that package where the president's doctors are trying their best to paint a very rosy picture of the president's health, saying he could be released from hospital as early as tomorrow. There are no plans for the vice president to assume authority. The election is a month away. How do we know Donald Trump is in good enough health to be president, to run for president again?
Well, ultimately, that's up to the voters. The problem with that is that gives not just President Trump, but every president, an incentive to paint a rosy picture of their condition and to conceal bad news so that the voters will think that they're in control, that they're strong. And that's been a real problem in our history.
It's not just limited to the United States. This summer, Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, got COVID-19. He was in hospital. His doctors painted a rosy picture, but only when he got released from hospital did we find out how bad it actually really was.
Yes, although I believe he did transfer power to his deputy while he was being treated, because that's an easier thing to do in a parliamentary system. In a presidential system, it's very rare that a president would be so incapacitated that they would agree to hand over power. And when they do, everyone would know, and that's one of the reasons why they don't. When President Reagan was shot, he was under general anesthesia for hours, but they never transferred power.
Now, the election is on the 3rd of November. That date seems to be set in stone. How soon can, let's just for argument's sake, say things aren't going well for the U.S. president, can a new candidate be announced this close to the election?
Yes, there's no process for changing the name on the ballot, but up until the election is made official, which is December 14th, when the members of our electoral college cast their votes, if a candidate dies or drops out, they can still be replaced. The party would choose a replacement, probably Vice President Pence, but they could pick anyone they want before the election is formalized on December 14th.
Given that we are in a pandemic, is there any possibility that the election date could be changed or not at all?
It's possible, but it's very difficult. It would require an act of Congress. I don't think that the House and the Senate and the President would all agree. I think they would be much more likely to just say, hold the election, let the chips fall where they may, And because if they delayed it, when would they delay it to? The pandemic isn't going to be ending anytime soon, and the president's term ends January 20th, whether there's been an election or not. So they need time to hold the election, to count the votes, to know who the new president is going to be in time for that January 20th hard deadline.
Brian Cole, thank you very much for joining us on the program today. In other news, the president of Azerbaijan is calling on Armenia to lay out a timetable for withdrawing from Nagorno-Karabakh. In a televised address, he said the enclave is Azeri territory and pledged to get it back to Azerbaijan. He also called on Armenia to issue an apology before any ceasefire is declared.
In western Azerbaijan, buildings lie in ruins in the town of Ganja. 100 kilometers north of the breakaway Nagorno-Karabakh region's main city of Stepanakert. The town's residents say a salvo of rocket fire could only have come from separatist forces.
Biz ermənilərdən atəş səsi eşitdik, amma qorxmuruq, durmuşuq, duracaqda, heç arada gedən deyilik. Olan öz pisliyi özlərinə qalacaq.
As the worst outbreak of fighting since the early 90s escalates, areas beyond Nagorno-Karabakh are increasingly finding themselves under fire, with each side accusing the other of deliberately targeting civilians and worse.
Ermənistan silahlı qüvvələri tərəfindən beynəlxalq konvensiyalara əsasən qadağan edilmiş klaster adlanan, yəni kasetli bombalardan da istifadə edilir və bunlar xüsusilə Smersh raket sistemlərinə daxil edilərək Azərbaycanın şəhərlərinə qarşı atılır.
While Armenia backs the separatists, who are also ethnically Armenian, it's denied Baku's claims.
Հայաստանի Հանրապետության տարածքից Ադրբեջանի տարածք որևիցե հեռահար հրետակոծություն կամ հրթիռների օգտագործում չի իրականացվել դեռևս.
Yet, an ominous statement in a conflict frozen for nearly 30 years. No nation, including Armenia, has ever recognized Nagorno-Karabakh as independent. However, as that conflict thaws once more, it's now threatening to draw in regional powers like Armenia's Russian backers and Azerbaijan's Turkish allies, with neither side seemingly yet prepared to come to the negotiating table despite international pleas.
Voters in New Caledonia overwhelmingly voted to remain part of France. The French President Emmanuel Macron welcomed the outcome of the referendum and reached out to pro-independence supporters. Macron said France was trying to overcome its colonial history in the territory. For more on how today's result demonstrates the pro-independence movement is growing in New Caledonia, here's France 24's international affairs editor Philip Turrell reporting.
I don't think the French authorities are all that relieved. They have got through two referendums where New Caledonia has voted to remain part of France. Why is that important for France? Because New Caledonia has sixth in the world supply of nickel, and France is also keen to keep its influence in the South Pacific. It's really the only European country after Brexit that will have an influence down there. So it's important that France remains in evidence in the South Pacific. So the French authorities want New Caledonia to remain part of France. But as you were saying, the result today is less good than the result 2 years ago. And this leads one to believe that there is growing support for independence in New Caledonia. So Emmanuel Macron, in his speech just a short while ago, really trying to galvanize support for the future of New Caledonia, calling for all people on the island to come together, and saying that if there were to be a third referendum, that France would back that idea if MPs in New Caledonia voted for it. So France saying it will do what the Caledonian people want, and Emmanuel Macron making it quite clear that France would not interfere in everyday affairs in New Caledonia, which of course is one of the complaints that the indigenous population there has always made about France, and that is why they want independence. Of course, on the other side, there are those who want to remain part of France, saying that they don't want to lose the €1.5 billion subsidy that France gives them every year, and they don't see a future for New Caledonia as an independent party, and they're blaming the Kanak population of wanting to go ahead with independence but not really having a plan for pushing that through.
Philip Turl reporting there. Now, Franco-Japanese designer Kenzo Takada died today at the age of 81. According to his family, he died from complications due to COVID-19 at a hospital near Paris. Takada retired from Kenzo, the fashion house he created in 1999. Kenzo Takada began his journey in France back in 1965, working as a freelance designer. Yves Saint Laurent was an important inspiration to his work. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching.